Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent experiences in business.
Learn what their cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again. All right. Welcome, cohesive leaders. Ben-Jamin and Dr. Troy here. And we are joined today with Michelle Merritt. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen. I'm excited to chat with you.
So, Michelle, one of the things we like to do to get started is to have you tell us something about you that is not on your resume.
Something that is not on my resume. My go-to response for that, and there are lots of things not on my resume, is that I am an amateur gardener, and I have cultivated plants and flowers and rhubarb. I live in the Midwest. Rhubarb and peonies that are more than 3 or 4 generations old. So my yard is full of peony bushes from my great-grandmother in Iowa.
Oh, wow. So I have to ask then, so why would you label yourself, with a condition of gardener? Why aren't you just saying, hey, I'm a gardener?
An amateur gardener, because I'm really not great at it. The plants have survived because they are hardy Iowa plants. And in the Midwest, we are a hardy bunch. But no, amateur's still a fair term. Trust me.
It's still there.
If you saw all the things that died, you'd understand why.
Well, Ben has suffered 27 near-death experiences, so he might have worked pretty well as a plant in your garden then.
There you go.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad you survived.
Yeah.
And I was chased by an albino peacock in France. And I survived. So you see, I guess I'm pretty hardy.
Now, I am afraid of birds, so that is like my worst nightmare.
Wow.
Well, the bird was doing really well when I did the selfie, and I do have a selfie to prove it. I have the selfie there, but then the bird was then after me after that. So
you should have had it out on video, and then it would have been so much better.
The video would have been so cool.
You would have gone viral for sure.
That absolutely, but
was it shrieking that came out of you and not the bird, or what was
Well, no, the bird just took after me, and I just took off. Unfortunately, he was more in his space. Once he recognized I was no longer in his space, then he came back to normal. But it's just so interesting because who thinks of an albino peacock, right?
Right.
You don't even think that that's even possible, because you think of peacocks as this beautiful colors, and majesty, but the bird is very majestic.
Why you saw it in captivity then?
Yeah, it's all white.
It wasn't going to make it in the wild.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle. So one of the things we like to do is to have our listeners get to know you a little bit. And so we're going to ask you about who you are. But before we ask about the roles and hats you wear, want to know what is your identity? So character traits, behaviors, what is it that other people would describe you as? What are the things you just aspire to be described as, character value-wise, independent of roles and hats you have? So who is Michelle?
The ultimate cheerleader. It's true. I fought that for years, but the truth is that I am your cheerleader. I am your advocate. I am the person, whether we're talking about who I am as an individual, as a spouse, as a mother, all coworker, colleague, leader, pick a role. I was a cheerleader as a young woman, but it carried through into everything in my life. The people closest to me will also tell you that I am the friend with the shovel. I am that person.
Okay.
Explain that for folks who may not know that.
Yeah, we need to unpack
we need to unpack that, do we?
Before it goes too far, yes.
Yeah, so it's been said more than once that I am the person who will show up in the middle of the night with a shovel, asking no questions whatsoever.
No wonder that garden of yours does so well. We had no idea.
Right. That's where I plant the peonies. But yes,
I feel like a movie set is coming
Right,
on here, you
right.
know, or something.
Yeah, this is going to show up in my Dateline episode of some weird twisted story here. But
You're a 3 a.m. friend.
I am a 3 a.m. friend.
There you go.
I'm a big believer that you should have a couple of those in your life. And we are both me as a person, but also as a family, we are a family that simply shows up for one another. And I believe most of the battle in life is showing up.
So narrow down to at least 2 qualities, values, words that you might use that would really describe, because you did a great job of being descriptive. But what's a couple of values that you would actually say?
Consistency.
Okay.
Right. So that's the showing up part.
Okay.
And being unabashedly visible. That's more than one word. Both
Hashtag.
in my
Hashtag unabashedly. Yeah,
right.
that one.
Exactly. Both for as an individual, but also in promoting those people around me and making them visible.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Great.
Good.
I'm a lucky girl. I get to show up for some really great people.
And awesome. And I think I might add you to the list, and I don't care if you bring a shovel or not. So yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. I mean, now my best friend that's what she always refers to me as her friend with the shovel. And I always tell people, I mean, dig her out of trouble.
Not bury the dead bodies.
Oh,
right. Yeah. Her description might be different than mine, but mine is because I look really bad in orange stripes. So I'm going to call my attorney and dig you out of trouble.
okay, I got you. Okay, that sounds great. And then I know you mentioned one of your roles was like cheerleader, and then with a family member. What are some other roles that you've had?
Oh, other roles I've had. So obviously, I mentioned being a mom and a spouse to 2 really great guys. But in addition to that, I am an advocate in my community. Certainly, I serve as a commissioner for the Westfield, Indiana Police Department, their Merritt Commission. So I'm super proud of that and super proud of that role in supporting my community as well.
Nice. Well, I'm really glad we got a chance to get to know a little bit about you. This is a little segment that we call Connections Before Content. We find that from a leadership perspective, so often we resign ourselves to being defined by the roles we play, that big capital R. But realistically, who we are inside is the big I. Who are we as individuals? So thanks for sharing some information in that. And I think now,
a little more professionally. So currently, what is it that you're doing, and what has led up to what you do?
Yeah, so I am the Chief Strategy Officer for D&S Executive Career Management. So we guide executive leaders and aspiring leaders through the job search, interview, and salary negotiation and compensation negotiation process. We do the same for aspiring and existing board directors who are seeking paid board appointments. So our clients range anywhere from that manager, that mid-level manager, all the way up to C-level leaders in Fortune 100 organizations.
Well, that's really great to do that. And that's one of the things that Ben and I recognized for this group of individuals that, listen to our podcast, is that they're often seeking some advancement and maybe even an opportunity for a promotion, but they don't really have a plan and no one's really helped them with it. So we offer a community program where they can get career services. So we know how helpful that can be.
We love that. Yes, we have D&S focuses mostly on senior level leaders, but then we've had so many clients referring other team members and their neighbor and their kids and all the things to us that this year we launched a sister company called Collab Careers. And that's where we support the group that you're talking about. And we love doing that as well. So I have a rock star team of 15 writers and coaches, and they dive in, they show up for everybody just as much as I do.
Yeah. Awesome.
We've done a good start for the connections. Now let's go into some content. What experience are you prepared to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I lost $1.4 million in my career by not negotiating.
So at one time or over collectively?
Collectively.
Okay.
So, and it has propelled me into the role I have today.
Okay. Paint the picture though. How did this happen?
Pardon me. So in my first what my parents probably would have called my first real job back in my early 20s, didn't really, I knew how to negotiate, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I was so eager and so afraid of being told no that I failed to negotiate at all in my first job offer, right? I think I was 23 at the time. And I was so eager and wanted that job so badly that I didn't even think to ask for more, or to really be able to, or really put a plan together to articulate why I was worth more than that. And later on, after I was working for the company, I learned that I left about $10,000 on the table. Now, $10,000 may not sound like a lot to you and I in 2025, but in 1990 something, it was a lot, right? And it's still a lot today for me. I mean, I'm not going to turn down $10,000 probably. And if you do some quick math and recognize that, because our incomes, they start to level up based on that initial number, right? Our raises are often calculated as a percentage of our income, of our current salary, things like that. We may negotiate our next opportunity based on what we believe we're worth, which is the current compensation that we have. And if you just took that $10,000 and every year put it back in my 401k, over the lifetime of a 40-year career, it comes out to $1.4 million, just on a boring 4% non-risk.
Wow. I was wondering how you're going to get to that number of whether did you keep on doing the same mistake over and over again? No. So I love the perspective there of the matriculation over time of the impact that it had.
I mean, that's what most of us are striving for in our retirement accounts, right? And here I left it all sitting on the table.
So we understood why you left it on the table. So what was some of the, what got you to realizing that, oh, wow, I did leave $10,000 on the table? At what point did you figure out that?
I came across a document by accident that was, a job description and a pay range at work a year or two after I started with that company, and saw that the pay range was much larger. I was definitely being paid on the low end of that compensation package. And at that point, it's not easy. It's not that it can't be done, but it is not easy to go back and try to renegotiate a year or two later when you've accepted the role.
And you've been doing it.
And you've been doing it and doing it successfully. And I could argue for a raise, which I did get, but it didn't make up the difference.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So you had this moment where you lucked into figuring it out, right?
Right.
Because, and then were there any other things that like, now that you know about it, you can't undo it, right? Because you now know, so you don't unknow it. What did that, when we know that it cost you 1.4 million. So this question is kind of, might be silly, but I want to ask it just so we stay true to our format, that we know it cost you 1.4 million. What did it cost you personally?
I think in the beginning it was a little bit of shame, right? Because how could I not know that? And I'll preface that by saying I had two I was the luckiest young woman alive. I had the best grandparents you would ever meet. And in the 70s, my one grandfather was an insurance adjuster. The other was a draftsman. And both of them were master negotiators. And they would take me along with them when they would go places and cut a business deal or buy a car, for example. My grandfather Merritt took me once when he had decided he was buying a new Cadillac. And he, of course, did all of his research ahead of time and things like this. And then went to the dealership with a bank check, and said, I'm going to buy this Cadillac and here's what I'm paying for it. And the salesman said, I'm sorry, sir, we can't sell that to you for that price. Yes, you can. I've done my research. No, I can't. We do the dance back and forth. Let me talk to my manager, et cetera, et cetera. My grandfather stands firm. He's done his research. He knows the math. He knows his numbers. And he knows the value he brings to that dealership, because no one's having to work for all of that, right? He's just walking in and handing them a check. They say no. He says, okay. And he walks away. We leave. About 6 o'clock that evening, the Cadillac pulls into the driveway with the salesman driving the Cadillac and a car pulling up next behind it. Sir, I'd like that check, please. And here are your keys and the title. I have someone coming to get me. Right. And so I got a front row seat to things like this. And yet I still failed to negotiate when it came to my compensation. Now, you can make the argument that I was young, that I didn't necessarily know better, things like that. And I maybe didn't see an example of negotiating at work, but I was also just so eager that I wasn't willing to walk away. And that was one of the things that my grandfather taught me very quickly, was be willing to walk away, so that you don't ever be so attached to a deal or to a compensation package or to a job that you can't walk away and make a decision that's really better for yourself. And so that's where the shame part. And I think,
and what I want to distinguish again for people listening is there's a difference between being eager and being desperate.
right.
So this story had nothing to do with you being desperate for the job. Desperate,
No.
like, I've got to get the job. I've got to put food on the table. I've got
No,
to take
not
care
at
of
all.
kids. I've got to do that. It's just that this was your dream career. You had this perfect opportunity to do it, and you accepted the number right off the bat without really having done that research. So in other words, what you missed out on was the research that Grandpa Merritt had done ahead of time. You didn't have that. So therefore, you didn't have the mental check. Oh, and this is what I love this, because what you've helped me present is the fact that, getting ready for negotiation. For those folks listening, I mean, it's like, have the mental check in your mind of what you're going to pay or be paid. And then, like you said, will you have the courage to walk away from it? And by the way, there is no shame if you do not walk away from it. There is no shaming in this, but the idea is understand so that you have power over the choices and decisions you make, and you don't just become an accidental decision maker. You become a purposeful, intentional decision maker.
You bet. You bet. And you know your value, right? I always tell clients today, know your automatic yes and your automatic no. Right? What is that automatic yes? What is that package? Because compensation is about more than just money. What is that package that you could easily say, oh my gosh, yes, right away? Now, we don't advise that, and I would never tell anyone to say yes immediately. However, there's a number, there's a package that says, yep, I don't have to check in at home. I don't have to even think about it. I could say yes immediately.
Yeah.
The other number is, doesn't matter how much I love you, doesn't matter how excited I am about the role, but if it doesn't meet these bare minimum requirements, I just can't do it. I can't make it work. Everything else in the middle is negotiable.
So so I know you're with a lot of executives, there seems to be a lot more direction towards the package and not just the financial number. How would you coach the younger crowd to do this, to look for things, to understand the negotiation is sometimes the money's the money, and they could be stretching it. Like, how do you coach them to be creative? Because you want other things, and so I'm just throw that out
you. Absolutely. So the number one thing is, again, know what matters to you, right? Know what is the value you bring to the table. I mentioned I had two grandfathers that taught me well in the 70s and 80s. And for those of you who are so young and listening to this podcast, what it's important to know here is that in 1975 to 1985, when this was happening in my life, nobody took young girls along to a business meeting. No one took young women along to buy a car. Right. That was just shocking to people that happened. And so one of the things I learned very quickly from my maternal grandfather, my grandfather Minx, was that, it's important to know who you are, the value you bring, and to be confident in that. Now, there's no need to be arrogant. That's not going to help your cause. Right. But if I know my numbers, if I've done the research, if I can present myself in a way that has a professional presence, things like this, I know what my values are, then I know that I know how to ask for those things. So it's number one, knowing what's important to you. There might not be an opportunity to have more cash in your salary, right, in your paycheck. They may simply say no to that. Okay, great. Is there an opportunity to include workplace flexibility, right? Is that, do you want to work from home some days? Is that part of that package? Are there opportunities for better benefits, for additional vacation, for personal time, for other 401k contributions, things like that? What are the other pieces and parts that you can begin negotiating? Each industry has different things that matter. Some have better discounts if it's a product focused organization, things like that. So what we want to do is make sure you understand what is important to you. Major Fortune 100 companies may provide childcare, for example. So if you are in your 30s or early 40s and you have a young family, or 20s and you have a young family, then, at work childcare may be an important thing, or the flexibility to meet the needs of the daycare so that you're not, getting stuck with, getting kicked out of daycare because you didn't pick your child up on time more than once. So that flexibility, all of those pieces can be things that get negotiated. Heck, we negotiate severance when we start talking about leadership roles in the beginning, sort of like a prenup.
And I love this because, the one thing, because we work with a number of, HR folks, especially when we go inside organizations and we really bring forth our training and development programs, because we really focus on culture and leadership and strategy and things of that nature. And part of what we have been speaking life to in various circles is the fact that it's no longer just salary administration in HR, it's compensation administration. So you're really managing the full compensation. And so for individuals listening, thinking that it's only salary that they should be negotiating, they have heard from an expert. They heard from an expert amateur gardener that they should absolutely be looking at compensation as a holistic picture, not just as just the one piece, which is the salary, and to really be asking those, really for more understanding of what that can be, because you're right, it has different values for different people. I mean, we just did some. Well, we didn't do the research, we uncovered from some research, is that individuals would leave their job if it was the right culture. So they're willing to even take a pay cut if they could work in the right environment. That's how important environment and things like that is today, where as before, it wasn't like that. And I'm like you, I understood the 70s and the 80s, and I know, let the hair color fool you. But the point is, these things have evolved, but today, 50 years later, it's taken for granted. But during the time, even though the act in 1974 allowed women to, for the first time, to be able to not be discriminated against for lending practices, you know as well as I do, it takes a long time for that stuff to transpire. I mean, we're looking at civil rights issues still 60 years later, and we still haven't got our act together. So you can just imagine how important it is for us to pay attention to how we've evolved.
In 2005, I was asked where my husband was when I bought my first house.
Yeah, shame.
Wow.
So keep that in mind, that
only 20 years ago. Yeah.
Right. Only 20 years ago. And I was buying the house myself. So, change takes a long time. And that's what I think is so important when we think about compensation, right? Is that it is becoming more and more common that we expect people to come to the table and negotiate. It used to be that we only thought C-level executives or salespeople would negotiate. And now we are expecting more and more people to negotiate, to ask for more. And it's all in how you do it, I think, and the approach. Again, arrogance doesn't serve you in cases like this. And so there's a right way and a wrong way to ask.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that too. Ben, go ahead, and I'll then fill in later.
Mine is simply on the idea of the arrogance. Where's the coaching on the line of that? In the executive world, I can imagine that there's sometimes the ability and maybe acceptance of some wild requirements, right, that they're willing to take, and they can say, well, they want double this job versus the last job just because they have this experience now. But I have seen some ridiculous desires and requests from a 20 something just out of college that expects $75,000, $100,000 off the get. Where is the coaching or the line for that of them asking for the moon, and they might be able to deliver? Like, so how do you, where do you draw that line?
Sure. So number one, know what you can really bring to the table. Right. So we've talked about knowing your automatic yes, your automatic no, what matters to you in those packages, but know what you bring to the table and your value there. So a few years back, I had a young woman call me. She worked in Silicon Valley. She was under 35, I would say. It was her second job. And she had been interviewing, and she called me up and said, I hear you can teach me how to get $350,000 in annual salary. And she worked in IT. And I said, which may have legitimately been a reasonable salary given what was going on at the time in the tech world and what she did. And I said, okay, great. Happy to help you. Tell me what you've done to earn that salary. Well, I just want it. Well, I could want to be the Pope. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. So let's stop and think about what you've done. What value do you bring? Recognize that compensation is the employer's investment in you as a person and you as a professional to move their organization forward. So if you can't demonstrate the ROI you bring, we have a problem on our hands. And that's where it gets arrogant, right? Well, I just want it is arrogance. I bring X, Y, and Z and that has resulted for my previous employer in a cost savings here and an increase in revenue here and a contribution to efficiency data here. Those are the things that matter to the employer.
And that's where there's the rub is that a younger generation is seeing folks that make money from attention as influencers, right? They see folks making money there, but what they're not seeing is actually I know a lot of those that do a lot of work. They are editing, they're doing video. So the understanding that the value they're bringing to companies is, so what they're getting paid is actually slightly peanuts compared to the value they're actually bringing, but they are doing work. So I know influencers that work 12 to 14-hour days, something that I want nothing to do with because I don't want to be on a screen at all. And they're willing to do the editings on the small phones and whatever. Right. So, but that becomes some of the things we see is that, even a high school kid that doesn't want to go to school is like, well, I want to make, $30 an hour, but they don't see that the reward or the contribution that an influencer that is good at what they do does. They actually, it is a job. And I feel just like when you get in the sport realm and people ask about them making money, like, well, percentage of money that they make compared to what they bring in is still not a high percentage. So it's kind of crazy.
It's so true. I mean, we just went through this I live in Indianapolis, and we just went through this with Miles Turner being traded this week from the Pacers. And, what is the value of what a 10-year team member brings to the organization? And I can tell you there are some disappointed Hoosiers in the Simon family's decision because it was pretty, I don't think it was easy for him to be swept away from what he said, but there came a point where it just made sense that the other offer was better. So, really understanding your value, your worth, what is important to you, and proving that ROI does not mean that someone's going to give you what you're asking for. And then you have decisions to make at that point.
It's about being prepared is really what it is for the most part. And, so Ben and I have prepared some leadership coaching for individuals who are in this position. They're dissatisfied with their current employer, not getting the training and development they need. They're being passed over for promotion. They have no plan for improvement. And so we created, so the book that we launched, which was Becoming a Cohesive Leader, was #1 in leadership training and several other categories. But that one was really important to us. But as part of the I guess what we say, the extension of the story is we added Carl, who is our cohesive artificial response leader. And he is AI-powered book bot. He's the first AI-powered book bot of his kind. He's an accompaniment to the book, but he's also really an AI leadership coach, and he can provide information. So we have prepared Carl for information. And one of the questions that typically some of our listeners may have asked, or certainly others like them have asked, is, how do I approach my boss for a promotion? And the very first thing that Carl says in his response is exactly what you highlighted, which says, before you approach your boss, ensure you have a solid understanding of your achievements and how they align with the organization's goals. Reflect on how you've contributed to the team and the company. And I think all of that is understanding your worth. And what I really want to focus on is, yes, you want to understand your individual worth, but you also need to be speaking enterprise-wide language to the place you're going, because you want to be able to say how you're going to contribute to the team, not just to you individually, because not everybody's looking for a LeBron James. They're looking for individuals who will be part of a cohesive group of individuals, because in working environments, that's what happened. You have cross-functional teams and they are working. And you want to make sure that you have the right mindset for doing it. Like, do you have a growth mindset? Or are you just pretty, kind of laid back with where things are? Because there's, like you said, this money is an investment in the company. So they're really looking to see, do you have the mindset that will make that happening? And then I think, in this part, it's the communication, which is where your negotiation skills come in. You have to communicate appropriately. It's not a demand. It is simply, it is more factual of what is the worth, and where you can see that worth and how that worth can actually, really open things up for you. So I really love that you validated the information that we're already providing. Thank you for that.
I'm happy to help. Two things I'll add to that. Number one, I always remind people that your resume, your interview, your compensation negotiation, all of these pieces, they're about you, but not for you. They're for the listener. They're for the reader. They're for the person on the other side of the desk, right? So you want to make sure that you are really engaging based on that other person's priorities, which is part of what you've spoken to here. When you're talking about promotions, when you're talking about, approaching someone for a promotion, a couple additional things to think about there. Number one is, don't do it at the end of the year. When you get to your performance review, it is too late. Those numbers have already been decided. If your company works on a calendar year for its fiscal year, and at the end of the year, whether it be end of December or January 1, you find yourself doing that personal inventory and then that review with your boss, more than likely October 1st was when your boss's deadline was to make that decision as to who was being promoted and who got a raise. So we need to be having these conversations and preparing for these conversations over the summer. The other piece I'll add to that is making sure that you're having these conversations at the right time for your boss, at the right time for the person that is making the decisions here, right? Because we can get ourselves really worked up and think, I got to get this in. I got to get this in. I've got 30 minutes and I'm going to sneak that in somehow to my weekly check-in or my monthly check-in with my boss. And I'm just going to drop a bomb on them. Think about it from their perspective. What is the right timing when you're talking about a promotion, and what matters to your boss, and more importantly, to her boss from there, right? Because this has to go up the chain. This likely is not a decision your direct supervisor is making, depending on the size of the organization. So her boss, she's got to be able to sell this. So package it. We always say this about your resume too. Package it in a way that is an easy sell for the listener.
Oh my gosh, Ben, what a wealth!
That's so good.
Wealth of information today.
Is there one technique though? How can a emerging leader, not new hire, but someone that's looking to move up, how can they quantify those benefits though that they've brought to the company? Like, how do they produce their own ROI? Like, how is that done? Do they have to have commitment from their boss, or or they have to sneak around it to find value? Like, what are some skills that they can develop to help show that ROI that they bring?
Sure, we're not advocating for corporate espionage here. Let me be clear. But I will say that we want to be able to articulate the value of what you've done. So you're on let's say you are on a project team, and that project team has a specific goal, a specific outcome that they're tasked with, right? You can speak to your portion of that and how you contributed to that outcome. If that goal for the organization was to decrease expenses by a certain percentage, you can say that what you did on, XYZ team contributed to a 5% reduction in overall corporate expenses. You can translate that. You likely know or could easily find the annual revenue of the organization and then be able to do the math accordingly. But it might not be about that. It might be, if you're in HR, it might be that you've increased retention in your organization, and then do the math, because if you're in HR, you know what it costs to lose a person, which by the way is somewhere around $30,000+ for an entry to mid-level person for the time in which that person is out. So, and
wait a minute, but you also have to factor in not only the cost of what it is to recruit, but you also have the cost now of training, and it is very challenging to put on top of that the organizational intelligence that they actually walked out of the room. I have seen SHRM, and which stands, which is for the Society of Human Resource Management, right? So those reports of upwards of 150% of the salary is what they sometimes are thinking that it will take. That's what the company is paying an opportunity.
A 3-year employee, that it goes higher the longer they've been there. That's crazy.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's math that you can use, right? We can talk about from an HR standpoint what that looks like. Or if you're in HR and your focus is on benefits, right? Your how you've negotiated benefits contributes to the retention numbers, things like this. So get a little bit creative, but also ask yourself, if I were, if I'm advocating for a promotion or a raise, what have I done to deserve it? So even though I may be looking externally, use the things that you would use when advocating for a promotion or a raise to really leverage that in the resume and in the conversations, the interview conversations and the salary negotiation conversations. Making sure, as one of you mentioned, I think it was Ben, that you want to make sure that you are really engaging the reader, the company, the potential hiring manager in a way that speaks to their needs. So, for example, you come out of federal government. We have 57,000 people that are coming out of federal government and flooding the job market right now. With that list, what I always encourage our federal government clients, make sure that you're not using those acronyms. Make sure you're speaking in a way that the other person at the other end of the line can really understand.
No TLAs.
Awesome. Yeah.
No TLAs.
Oh, that's so funny. There we are. Just use a little acronym so we can confuse everyone. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, Michelle. So awesome information. Loved how you have helped our mentoring through mistakes or mishaps together. We do not wish for anyone to lose $1.4 million on purpose.
Me either.
What was a question that you thought Ben and I would ask you that we didn't?
Oh, good question. Why, if I went back and asked, and I think you sort of asked it in a way, but what I did to make up the difference.
Oh, the difference. Okay, great. Okay, good. All right, cool. Yeah. Glad we answered that. How do folks get a hold of you or get in touch with you?
So LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me. It's funny, Ben, you talked about being an influencer, and I was selected last year as a LinkedIn top voice, which is their stamp of approval for influencers, as you know. And I can tell you it is hard work. And I'm not even putting myself out there in videos with food. That would be even harder, I would think. But although I really do love food, so maybe I'll go there. But it is a lot of work to have that influencer sort of role. But yeah, LinkedIn is an easy place to find me, and I'm there all the time practically.
And so let's just get the name right. So it's Michelle Merritt, and that would be Michelle if you wanted to add a little
yes, if you wanted to get it fancy.
Fancy, but it's Michelle, and it's Merritt, Merritt. And I think Merritt works so perfectly with you with the amount of work you're doing, because it's the merit that you deserve, the merit that you earn. It's like we could just do a whole branding all around that, but we don't have time for that at the moment. And really do appreciate you coming on board and being with us today.
Well, thank you both. It's been great fun.
And so we like to close out all of our Cohesion Culture programs with a simple mantra, and it is this: you don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.